Gam Chinhe was a man who commanded fear, not affection. At 34, he ruled the Serpent Syndicate with an iron fist wrapped in silk. His decisions were law. His silence more threatening than another man's scream, and his tattooed hands had signed more death warrants than business contracts. He was accustomed to absolute obedience. Subordinates bowed when he passed. Enemies disappeared without trace, and women feared him even as they were drawn to dangerous allure of his power. What he never did, however, was consider black women, not as allies, not as companions, not as anything beyond invisible fixtures in a world that didn't concern him. It wasn't rage. It was something colder, a venomous indifference etched into him from childhood whispers and syndicate traditions that taught him some lines were never meant to be crossed. And so his reign continued in its brutal, calculated precision, until that evening. The summit hall of the Azure Lotus was a fortress of opulence, crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across marble floors, silk banners emblazoned with serpent motifs hanging from gilded columns, and a string quartet playing traditional melodies beneath the hum of dangerous conversation. Chinhe had attended the Inter-Syndicate Gala out of strategy, not pleasure. He stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, whiskey untouched in his tattooed hand, expression carved from stone, present but entirely uninterested, until he saw her. She entered like a storm wrapped in elegance, deep purple silk draped across her frame like royalty, commanding presence in every deliberate stride, rich brown skin radiant against the harsh lighting, and eyes that blazed with intelligence and defiance. Chinhe stilled. His pulse quickened against his will. His carefully constructed walls trembled, and in that singular, devastating moment, the MAFIA boss who had spent his entire life despising black women found himself utterly, dangerously captivated. Pause. Subscribe real quick, and drop your country in the comments. You need to witness what happens next. Chinhe's fingers tightened around his glass. This was unacceptable. He was Gam Chinhe. He didn't lose composure over anyone, least of all someone who shouldn't even register on his radar. Yet his feet moved before his mind could override them, cutting through the crowd with a predatory grace that parted bodies instinctively. She stood near the champagne fountain, speaking with an older diplomat, her laugh warm and genuine in a room full of calculated performances. Up close, she was even more devastating. The purple silk caught the light like liquid amethyst, and when she turned, her eyes met his with zero hesitation. "You're blocking my view," she said, voice smooth as aged whiskey with an edge that suggested she feared nothing. Certainly not him. Chinhe blinked. No one spoke to him like that, ever. His lieutenants would have executed someone for less. "I don't recall asking for your permission to stand here, and I don't recall requiring yours to enjoy my evening without intimidation tactics." She took a deliberate sip of champagne, holding his gaze. "Though I suppose men like you are accustomed to people cowering. How disappointing when they don't." Something dangerous flickered in his chest. Anger, yes, but laced with something electric he couldn't name. "You should be more careful about who you provoke." "Should I?" She tilted her head, studying him with unnerving directness. "Let me guess. You're used to respect born from terror. How exhausting that must be, constantly maintaining that facade. Does your face ever get tired of looking like carved granite?" His jaw clenched. This woman was either fearless or foolish, and he couldn't determine which. "You don't know who I am." "Oh, I know exactly who you are, Mr. Gam." Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Serpent Syndicate. 47 confirmed territorial acquisitions. Suspected involvement in at least 3 political assassinations. And apparently someone who thinks standing in purple silk makes a woman invisible. She leaned in slightly, close enough that her perfume, something rich and spiced, invaded his senses. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Chinhe felt his control fracturing in real time. She'd researched him, dismissed his power, and somehow turned his prejudice into a weapon against him. Every instinct screamed to walk away, to restore the natural order where he decided who mattered and who didn't. Instead, he found himself leaning closer, voice dropping to that lethal whisper his enemies heard last. "You're playing a dangerous game, miss." Steele, Anita Steele. She didn't retreat an inch. "And I don't play games, Mr. Gam. I win them." The words hung between them like a thrown gauntlet. Around them, the gala continued its elegant charade, but Chinhe heard nothing except a thundering rebellion in his chest. The part of him that wanted to destroy her audacity, and the part, deeper and more terrifying, that wanted to possess it entirely. Shinhei didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in his penthouse office overlooking the city's glittering sprawl, surrounded by dossiers his intelligence network had compiled within hours. Anita Steele wasn't just some socialite playing dress-up at elite gatherings. She was a threat wrapped in purple silk. The files painted a picture that made his jaw tighten. Yale Law, graduated top 3%. Senior partner at Steele and Morrison International by 32. Specialist in corporate acquisitions and hostile takeovers with a reputation for dismantling empires through legal precision rather than bloodshed. She negotiated treaties between warring corporations that governments couldn't touch, brokered deals worth billions, and, most dangerously, had ties to several politicians the syndicate had spent years cultivating. She was legitimate power. Real power. The kind that didn't need guns or fear to topple kingdoms. Shinhei closed the folder, his tattooed fingers drumming against the mahogany desk. She could be useful, an asset, someone whose connections and legal genius could shield the syndicate's operations beneath layers of corporate legitimacy. That's what this was. Strategic interest, nothing more. He picked up his phone and texted his assistant. Arrange a meeting with Anita Steele. My office. Tomorrow evening. The response came within 3 minutes. But it wasn't from his assistant. Unknown number. I don't take meetings in mob dens. If you want to talk, Celestial Gardens, 7 p.m. Come alone or don't come at all. Yes. His knuckles went white around the phone. She'd intercepted his request, responded directly, and set the terms. No one dictated terms to Gam Shinhei. He typed back, "You're making assumptions about who holds leverage here." Her response was immediate. "And you're making the mistake of thinking I need anything from you. 7 p.m. Don't be late." Shinhei arrived at Celestial Gardens at precisely 7, telling himself this was reconnaissance, nothing more. The restaurant was neutral territory, expensive, discreet, frequented by politicians and CEOs who value privacy. Anita sat at a corner table, wearing a tailored black suit that somehow made her more formidable than the purple dress had. She didn't stand when he approached. "You're 12 seconds late." "Traffic," he lied, sliding into the seat across from her. "You don't experience traffic, Mr. Gam. You create it." She pushed a menu toward him without opening her own. "I've already ordered for both of us. You strike me as someone who appreciates efficiency. You strike me as someone who enjoys overstepping boundaries. Only the ones that shouldn't exist in the first place." Her gaze was steady, clinical, dissecting. "You investigated me. Found out I'm not some decorative distraction you can intimidate or acquire. So now you're here, trying to determine if I'm an asset or a liability." Shinhei's expression remained neutral, but internally, his carefully constructed strategy was crumbling. "And which are you?" Anita smiled, and it was the most dangerous thing he'd ever seen. "Neither. I'm an inevitability." Shinhei returned to the Serpent Syndicate's headquarters with Anita's words echoing in his skull like a curse he couldn't shake. The underground complex was a labyrinth of steel and silence, where loyalty was currency and weakness was death. He'd barely crossed the threshold of his private chambers when Han appeared in the doorway. His right hand, his enforcer, the man who bled beside him for 15 years. "We need to talk." Han's voice carried none of its usual deference. He closed the door with deliberate force, and Shinhei recognized the warning signs of a confrontation he'd been anticipating. "Then talk." Shinhei poured himself whiskey, refusing to acknowledge the tension coiling through the room. "The elders are asking questions. About the woman." Han moved closer, his scarred hands flexing at his sides. "Anita Steele. You've been seen with her twice now, in public. I'm aware of my own schedule. Are you aware of what she represents?" Han's tone sharpened. "She's black, Shinhei. You know the rules, the traditions we've upheld for generations. Association with her kind brings shame to the syndicate. It makes you look weak, distracted, compromised." The word, her kind, landed like a blade between Shinhei's ribs. He set down his glass with controlled precision, his tattooed fingers steady even as rage ignited beneath his skin. "Careful, Han." "No, you be careful." Han stepped forward, dropping his voice to something almost pleading. "I've followed you into hell and back. I've killed for you. But this crosses a line even I can't defend. The elders are already questioning your judgment. They're saying you're losing focus, that she's manipulating you for information or leverage. She's not. It doesn't matter what she is. Han's composure cracked. What matters is what they believe. And they believe you're betraying everything the Serpent Syndicate stands for by entertaining someone who has no place in our world. He paused, letting the weight settle. Elder Choi called a meeting for tomorrow night. They're going to demand you end this before it becomes a problem. They handle themselves. The threat hung crystalline and sharp. Shin-hei understood the implication. If he didn't eliminate the distraction, the syndicate would. Anita's competence, her power, her connections meant nothing against generations of ingrained prejudice and tradition. She was an outsider, marked by her skin, and the Serpent Syndicate didn't tolerate deviations from the old ways. Tell the elders I'll attend their meeting. Shin-hei's voice was ice over volcanic fury. And tell them to remember who they're speaking to. Han's jaw tightened. They remember. Shin-hei, that's why they're worried. Because the man who never bends is bending now. He moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. She's just one woman. The syndicate is your legacy, your blood. Don't throw away everything for someone who'll never fit into this world. The door closed, leaving Shin-hei alone with a choice that was rapidly becoming no choice at all. Shin-hei had agreed to meet Anita one final time, to end this cleanly before the elders forced a Messier conclusion. The location was supposed to be secure. A private art gallery in the financial district, neutral ground where they could part ways like civilized strangers. He arrived early, scanning exits out of habit, his hand resting near the concealed weapon at his spine. Anita entered wearing deep emerald silk, and the sight of her made his resolve waver before she'd spoken a single word. "You're here to say goodbye," she said without preamble, reading him with that unnerving accuracy. The syndicate's applying pressure. This was always temporary. The lie tasted like ash. Temporary. She stepped closer, close enough that he could count the gold flecks in her dark eyes. Is that what you tell yourself when you can't sleep at night thinking about? The gallery's front windows exploded inward. Shin-hei reacted on pure instinct, tackling Anita behind a marble sculpture as bullets shredded the air where they'd stood. Glass rained down like deadly snow. He drew his weapon, mind racing through scenarios. Rival gang. The elders cleaning up their problem. Police raid gone aggressive. East exit, he commanded, already moving. But Anita grabbed his arm with surprising strength. No, that's where they'll expect you to run. She pulled a tablet from her clutch. Who brings a tablet to a gallery? And her fingers flew across the screen. Building blueprints. There's a service elevator behind the contemporary wing. Leads to underground parking connected to 3 different buildings. Her voice was steady despite the chaos, clinical and focused. We go up first, make them think we're trapped on the 3rd floor, then double back to the maintenance corridors. More gunfire erupted. Shin-hei glimpsed 4 attackers advancing through the smoke, professional, coordinated, definitely not police. The Dragon Clan, his mind supplied, rivals who'd been waiting for him to be distracted and vulnerable. Move. He followed Anita's lead, and she navigated the gallery like she'd memorized its layout, which she apparently had. They sprinted up the emergency stairs, Anita somehow managing heels and speed simultaneously. Shin-hei provided cover fire as they burst on the 3rd floor. Then she led them through a hidden staff corridor he'd never have found. How did you... I research everything. She was already hacking the service elevator's control panel with something attached to her tablet, especially places where dangerous men might get me killed. The elevator opened. They descended in suffocating silence, his body pressed against hers in a confined space, both their hearts hammering. When the doors opened to parking garage, Anita pointed to a black sedan. Mine. I parked it here this morning. You plan an escape route before the meeting. I plan everything, Mr. Gam. She unlocked the car, sliding into the driver's seat. Are you getting in, or would you prefer to die proving a point? Shin-hei got in. As she peeled out of the garage with professional precision, he stared at this woman who just saved his life with preparation and intelligence. No panic, no hesitation, just lethal competence wrapped in emerald silk. And he realized with devastating clarity that he was no longer capable of letting her go. They ended up at one of Shin-hei's safe houses, a minimalist penthouse overlooking the harbor where rain now lashed against floor-to-ceiling windows. Anita stood at the glass, arms crossed, her emerald dress torn at the hem, while Chinhei paced like a caged predator behind her. This can't continue. His voice was raw, stripped of its usual control. You need to disappear. Leave the city tonight. I'll arrange everything. New identity, resources, protection. She turned slowly, and her expression was thunderous. You're trying to get rid of me. I'm trying to keep you alive. The words erupted from somewhere primal. The elders won't stop. The Dragon Clan will try again. And everyone in my world sees you as weakness, as corruption, as... He stopped, jaw locked. As what, Chinhei? She moved toward him, deliberate and unflinching. Say it. Say what they really see. As something I shouldn't want. His control shattered completely. You're black, Anita. Do you understand what that means in the Serpent Syndicate? I was raised to believe that people like you were beneath notice, unworthy of consideration, a contamination to our bloodline and traditions. For 34 years, that poison was fed to me until it became part of my DNA. The silence that followed was suffocating. Anita's face remained impassive, but her eyes blazed with something between fury and pain. And you still believe it, she said quietly. That's why you want me gone. Not to protect me, but to protect yourself from the shame of wanting someone your bigoted syndicate taught you to hate. No, the word came out desperate. I don't believe it. That's the problem. I look at you and everything I was taught disintegrates. You're brilliant. You're fearless. You saved my life today with nothing but your mind and preparation. He ran tattooed hands through his hair, the carefully controlled boss crumbling into something raw and human. You're everything I never knew I needed, and I'm terrified because I don't know how to want you without betraying everything I've been. Then betray it. Anita closed the distance between them, her voice fierce. You think I don't see the war you're fighting? You think I haven't faced prejudice my entire life and learned to stare it down? She pressed a hand against his chest, over his racing heart. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to choose the man you were raised to be or the man you're becoming. Chinhei caught her wrist, his grip gentle despite the violence trembling through him. If I choose you, I lose everything. If you choose them, you lose yourself. Her eyes held his, unwavering. And you lose me. Something inside him broke, or perhaps finally healed. He pulled her against it with a force that bordered on desperation, and when their lips met, it wasn't gentle. It was confession and defiance, surrender and declaration, the death of Gam Chinhei the obedient weapon, and the birth of something dangerously, irrevocably human. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. I choose you. God help us both. I choose you. The Emergency Syndicate Council convened 3 days later in the temple beneath their headquarters, a cavernous space lit by red lanterns where the elders sat in judgment like ancient gods. Chinhei entered alone, knowing this would be the reckoning Han had warned about. 7 elders watched it with expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed rage. Elder Choi spoke first, his voice like gravel over bone. You were summoned to explain your association with the Steel Woman. Instead, you've been seen with her publicly, repeatedly, defiantly. You bring shame to our traditions. I bring results, Chinhei countered, his tone steel wrapped in silk. Our territorial expansion has tripled under my leadership. Our political connections have never been stronger. What I do in my private life doesn't diminish that. Your private life became our concern when you chose to parade a black woman, as though she were worthy of the Serpent Syndicate's acknowledgement. Elderman leaned forward, his contempt naked. You were promised to Haewon, a union that would unite our faction with the northern clans. Yet you throw that away for temporary infatuation with someone who taints our bloodline. As if summoned by mention, the chamber doors opened. Haewon entered, elegant and cold in traditional silk, her family's enforcers flanking her. She'd been Chinhei's intended since childhood, a strategic arrangement he'd never questioned until Anita had shattered his world. I've come to release you from our engagement publicly, Haewon announced, her voice carrying practice hurt, since you've clearly chosen humiliation over honor. She turned to the elders, playing her role perfectly. My family withdraws our alliance. Let the Serpent Syndicate suffer the consequences of tolerating such weakness in their leader. The threat was clear. Losing the Northern Alliance meant losing territory, resources, and military support. Chin-Hei felt the weight of generations pressing down on him, demanding he recant, apologize, sacrifice Anita on the altar of tradition. Instead, he removed the jade serpent ring from his finger, the symbol of his absolute authority within the organization, and placed on the stone table before the elders. Then I resigned as Supreme Commander. The chamber erupted. Elders shouted over each other. Han appeared from the shadows looking stricken, and Hei-Wan's calculated composure cracked into genuine shock. You would abandon everything? Elder Choi demanded. Your legacy, your power, your very identity for her? My identity was chosen for me before I could speak. Chin-Hei's voice cut through the chaos with finality. I'm choosing for myself now. I'll transition leadership over the next month, ensure stability, but my decision is final. The Serpent Syndicate can evolve past its prejudice, or it can remain trapped in traditions that make it weak. He looked directly at Elder Choi. I choose evolution, even if I have to do it alone. He walked out of the temple knowing he'd just signed his own death warrant. The Syndicate didn't accept resignations. They only accepted loyalty or elimination. But as he emerged into daylight where Anita waited in her car, her expression fierce with solidarity, Chin-Hei understood he'd finally made the first free choice his entire life. And he'd do it again. Don't blink. Subscribe. Comment your country. Then watch what happens next. You're not ready. The attack came on the fourth night, when Chin-Hei had foolishly believed the elders might grant him the month he'd requested for transition. He and Anita were at her penthouse, neutral ground, or so he thought, when Han's encrypted message arrived. They're coming for her. 12 men. Orders are total elimination. I'm sorry. Chin-Hei had 60 seconds before the windows exploded inward. He shoved Anita toward the reinforced panic room he'd insisted she install, but she grabbed a tactical knife from the drawer instead. I told you I don't run. Anita, we fight together or we die together. Choose fast. The first wave came through the shattered glass. Syndicate enforcers he'd trained himself, lethal and loyal only to the Elder's commands. Chin-Hei met them with the violence he'd spent a lifetime perfecting, his tattooed hands delivering death with surgical precision. He broke the first man's neck, disarmed the second, put a bullet to the third's throat. But there were too many. Anita moved like liquid shadow, her corporate facade stripped away to reveal something far more dangerous. She'd clearly trained for this, every movement economical, brutal, effective. She buried her blade in an attacker's kidney, rolled beneath gunfire, and threw a vase that shattered against another enforcer's skull with bone-crushing force. They fought back-to-back, their synchronization born from desperation and absolute trust. Chin-Hei felt blood, his own and others, slicking his hands as he crushed the throat, dodged the blade, fired until his clip emptied. The penthouse became a war zone of broken furniture and bodies. Then Elder Choi himself stepped through the doorway, flanked by his personal guard. The old man's face was a mask of righteous fury. You were our weapon, Chin-Hei, our legacy, and you threw it away for her. No. Chin-Hei reloaded with practiced speed, placing himself completely between Anita and the Elder. I threw away being your weapon. I kept my humanity. Humanity? Choi laughed, bitter and cold. You're a killer. That's all you'll ever be. The only question is whether you die as a traitor or reclaim your honor by eliminating contamination yourself. He gestured toward Anita, the command clear. Chin-Hei's response was to empty his magazine into Elder Choi's guards. The old man dove for cover, screaming orders, but Chin-Hei was already moving. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and wrapped his tattooed hand around the Elder's throat, lifting him against the wall with the strength of absolute conviction. I am a killer, Chin-Hei said quietly, his voice colder than death itself. But I choose who I kill now, and I choose to end the Serpent Syndicate's hold on my life. He snapped Elder Choi's neck with one efficient twist and let the body drop. The remaining enforcers froze. Without the Elder's direct command, without their Supreme Commander's leadership, they were adrift. Han appeared in the doorway, bloody but alive, and met Chin-Hei's eyes with something like grief and respect. It's done, Han said simply. The other elders are dead. Your loyalists made their choice. Chin-Hei turned to Anita, who stood among the carnage in torn silk and blood spatter, fierce and unbroken. He'd killed for power before. Tonight, He'd kill for love, and he'd burn his entire world down to keep her safe. Now we run, he said, taking her hand. Together. 6 months later, they stood on the balcony of a villa overlooking the Amalfi Coast, far from the blood-soaked streets of their former lives. The sunset painted the Mediterranean in shades of amber and rose, and Chinhei still wasn't used to peace. The absence of death threats, the quiet mornings, the way Anita laughed without looking over her shoulder. They'd use her legal genius and his strategic mind to build something legitimate, a private security and crisis management firm that protected executives, negotiated hostage situations, and dismantled human trafficking networks. The violence was still there, but now it served justice instead of power. Former syndicate loyalists who'd chosen Chinhei over tradition formed the core team, Han among them, carrying his own redemption like a cross. You're brooding again. Anita emerged from the villa, wearing a white sundress that made his heart forget how to beat properly. She'd let her hair grow longer, and the tension she'd carried in her shoulders had finally melted away. Thinking, he corrected, pulling her against him. 6 months, and he still marveled that she was real, that she'd chosen this life with him despite everything it had cost. Dangerous habit. She tilted her face up to his, and he kissed her like he had that first night, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning his entire life. When they broke apart, Chinhei reached into his pocket. The ring wasn't ostentatious. A simple band of platinum with a black diamond that caught the dying light like captured starfire. Nothing like the jade serpent he'd once worn as a symbol of cruel dominion. I need to ask you something. His voice was steadier than he'd expected, though his hands trembled slightly. I've spent my life taking what I wanted through force and fear. But you're the only thing I've ever earned. The only choice I've made that was truly mine. Anita's eyes widened, filling with something that looked dangerously like tears. I'm not the man I was. That version of me died in your penthouse the night we fought our way free. He dropped to one knee, the sunset casting his tattooed hands in gold. Anita Steele, you saved me in every way a person can be saved. You refused to let me hide behind hate. You fought beside me when you could have run, and you've given me something I never thought I deserved, a future without darkness. He held up the ring, his heart completely exposed. My heart has always been a weapon. Let it be your shield instead. Marry me. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Anita simply stared at him. Then she laughed, that warm, fierce sound he'd come to worship, and pulled him to his feet. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when he kissed her this time, it tasted like freedom and forever and the kind of love that could survive anything. The sun dipped below the horizon, and somewhere in the villa, Chinhei's phone began to ring. Han's encrypted line, the tone that meant urgent business. A new crisis, another threat, the remnants of their old world reaching forward to test their new one. But as Anita pulled back, her eyes fierce with that familiar fire, she grinned. Ready to go save the world together? Chinhei kissed her once more, then reached for phone. Oh,